The Galactic Council chamber spanned half a kilometer, its circular design forcing every representative to look upon their equals, or their enemies. Tonight, it hosted a trial. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the central defendant's platform, her spine straight, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a severe knot. She had represented Earth for 17 standard cycles. She had watched species rise and fall. She had never once begged. "The accused has violated Article 7 of the Galactic Accord," intoned Council Chair Xylos, his crystalline form pulsing with amber light. "The development of true artificial intelligence is forbidden. The development of consciousness transfer is forbidden. The development of singularity technology," Chen finished for him. "Yes, we read the laws." A ripple of agitation passed through the assembly. 347 species, each with their own anatomy, their own fears, their own thirst for control. The Vorkath delegation bristled, their reptilian spines rattling like war drums. The silicacs hummed with static disapproval. Even the gentle aquins, usually neutral, had darkened their bioluminescence to a somber blue. "You admit the violation?" Xylos asked. Chen tilted her head. "We don't admit anything. We simply acknowledge reality. You passed a law 15,000 years ago, before humanity had even discovered fire. You expected us to obey forever." The chamber erupted. Senior Representative Gorath of the Vorkath rose to his full 3 meters, his armored hide catching the chamber's cold light. "This is why we should have exterminated them when they first left their system. I warned the council," I said. "You said many things, Gorath." Chen's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "You said we were too violent, too unpredictable, too curious. You were right about the curiosity." Gorath's yellow eyes narrowed. "And now you have machines that think faster than any natural mind. You have uploaded your consciousness into networks. You have become." "More," Chen said simply. The chamber fell silent. Xylos pressed his crystalline appendages together. "The council has already deliberated. The sentence is exile. Earth's hyperspace lanes will be severed. Your solar system will be quarantined. No species shall trade with you, communicate with you, or acknowledge your existence. Humanity will be alone." He expected tears. He expected rage. He expected the desperate plight he had witnessed from 100 other species facing extinction. Chen Wei smiled. "Chair Xylos," she said, "do you know why we waited until after the vote to tell you?" Xylos's amber light flickered. "Tell us what?" Chen raised her hand. Behind her, a holographic display bloomed to life, showing Earth, blue and green and impossibly beautiful. But something was wrong. The planet seemed to shimmer, its edges blurring like a mirage. 15,000 years ago," Chen said, "the council banned singularity technology because you were afraid of what it would do to your power structures, afraid of losing control. You told yourselves it was for galactic stability." She turned to face the assembly, her smile widening. "But here's the truth. You were right to be afraid, just not for the reasons you thought." The hologram shifted. Earth's shimmer intensified, then split, revealing not one planet, but 3, each occupying the same space, each vibrating at different frequencies of reality. "You're not exiling us," Chen said. "You're trying to close a door that isn't there." Gorath slammed his tail against the floor. "What trickery is this? Your species cannot." "Our species just did," Chen's voice hardened. "The vote to exile Earth passed 17 seconds ago. In that time, humanity has already redefined the rules of this galaxy. The hyperspace lanes you're about to sever, we don't need them. The technology you banned, we've surpassed it. The quarantine you're about to impose." She stepped forward. The hologram exploded outward, revealing a network of shimmering threads connecting Earth to 1,000 star systems, including several belonging to the council members themselves. "You're already inside it." The chamber erupted in chaos. Humanity didn't just break the rules, they rewrote the entire game, and no one noticed until it was already over. Admiral Kaelver of the Vorkath Third Fleet received the news while inspecting his dreadnought's main cannon. The weapon could crack planets. He had used it 4 times in his career, each time with the cold satisfaction of a predator confirming its place at the top of the food chain. "Say that again," he growled at his communications officer. "The human ambassador claims they have infiltrated our networks. She says the exile is meaningless because they are already everywhere." Kelver's scales rippled with barely contained rage. He had fought humanity before in the brief conflict 60 cycles ago when Earth first expanded beyond its solar system. He had respected their ferocity. He had despised their arrogance. Now both emotions merged into something far more dangerous. "Launch the fleet," he ordered. "I want Earth reduced to rubble before this council session ends. Let them philosophize about rules while I enforce reality." The Third Fleet moved with terrifying efficiency. 15 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, over 200 support vessels, the same force that had pacified the Andromeda incursion and ended the Xylos-Morax war. They jumped through hyperspace, covering the 30,000 light-years to Earth in less than an hour. Kelver stood on the bridge as the Sol system materialized before them. The star was unremarkable, yellow, middle-aged, surrounded by the typical debris of planetary formation. But Earth. "Magnify," he ordered. The view screen zoomed in. Kelver's jaw went slack. Earth was there and it wasn't. The planet flickered like a dying hologram, its surface phasing between solid matter and something else, something the Admiral's eyes refused to process. Mountains became transparent, then solid again. Oceans seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Target the planet," Kelver said, forcing steel into his voice. "Main cannon, full power." The dreadnought's weapon hummed, drawing energy from the ship's quantum core. Kelver counted down, 3, 2, 1. The beam fired. It traveled at near-light speed, a concentrated lance of destruction capable of turning continents to glass. It struck Earth exactly where he had aimed, the North American continent, humanity's birthplace. Nothing happened. The beam passed through the planet as if it weren't there, scattering into the void beyond. Kelver watched, frozen, as the energy dissipated harmlessly against Jupiter's atmosphere. "Report," he whispered. "Sir, our sensors show the planet's mass is still present, but its location is uncertain." The tactical officer's voice trembled. "It's as if Earth exists in multiple spatial dimensions simultaneously. We cannot affect all of them at once." Kelver's claws dug into his command console. "Send ground forces, boarding parties, I want." A new voice filled the bridge, calm, human, female. "Admiral Kelver," said Ambassador Chen Wei, her image appearing unbidden on every screen. "I'm not on Earth, I'm not even in this dimension anymore, but I can see you, I can see all of you." She was sitting in what appeared to be a garden, surrounded by flowers that glowed with internal light. Behind her, the sky held 3 moons. "You're firing at a projection," she continued. "Earth is still there, but it's also here and in 1,000 other places you cannot reach. Your weapons are 5,000 years obsolete. Your tactics are ancient, your empire." She smiled, and for the first time, Kelver saw something in her eyes that made his ancient reptilian heart seize with fear. "Your empire is living on borrowed time." The screens went dark. And then, without warning, every ship in the Third Fleet lost power. Not weapons, not shields, everything, life support, gravity, engines. The dreadnought went dark, its crew floating in sudden weightlessness, its systems cold and dead. "This is not a weapon," Chen's voice echoed through the emergency speakers. "This is a demonstration. We could have let your ships drift forever. We could have scattered your atoms across the quantum foam. We chose not to." Emergency lights flickered back on. Gravity returned, but the main power remained offline. "Here is what will happen," Chen said. "You will return to the council. You will tell them what you saw, and you will tell them that humanity is ready to offer terms." Kelver's claws trembled. "What terms?" "Everything you've ever wanted: immortality, instantaneous travel, the end of scarcity. The council banned singularity technology because they feared what it would do, but humanity." Her voice softened almost to kindness. "We've already done it, and we're willing to share." The power returned. The fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the phantom image of a planet that no longer obeyed the laws of physics. Kelver stared at the view screen for a long time. Then he gave the order to turn around. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy had just been disabled by a species they tried to exile, and humanity hadn't even fired a shot. Council Chair Xylos had presided over the Galactic Council for 8,000 years. He had seen empires rise and crumble. He had mediated wars that consumed entire spiral arms. He had never, in all that time, felt genuine terror. Until now. The emergency session convened within hours of Kael'ver's return. The Vorkath admiral stood in the center of the chamber, his proud bearing replaced by something that looked disturbingly like humility. He described the weapon that wasn't a weapon, the planet that existed in multiple dimensions, the human who spoke to him from a garden beneath 3 moons. The Silicacs have reviewed the fleet's sensor data, reported Representative Glint, her silicon body refracting the chamber's light into anxious rainbows. The humans have indeed achieved dimensional phasing. Their planet exists in at least 11 spatial dimensions simultaneously. We cannot touch them. Then we find another way, hissed Gorath, his earlier confidence now tinged with desperation. We target their colonies, their outposts there. They have no colonies, interrupted Representative Miri of the Aquans, her voice resonant with sorrow. At least none that we can detect. The humans have, decentralized. Each individual exists simultaneously in multiple locations. Each consciousness is backed up across quantum states. You cannot kill what is already everywhere and nowhere. The chamber fell silent. Xylos felt the weight of 347 species pressing down on him, all of them looking to him for answers, all of them afraid. We must negotiate, he said finally. No, Gorath slammed his fist against his delegation's railing. We are the Vorkath, we do not negotiate with. With what? Miri asked quietly. What are they exactly? Not a species anymore, not an empire, not a collective intelligence. The humans have become something we have no word for. Chen Wei appeared without warning. Not hologram, not transmission. She simply materialized in the center of the chamber, stepping out of empty space as if walking through a door that hadn't existed a moment before. She wore simple clothes, a gray tunic, dark trousers. Her hair was loose now, falling around her shoulders. She looked like a professor about to begin a lecture. Thank you for gathering so quickly, she said. I know this has been a difficult cycle for everyone. Gorath drew a weapon, ancient Vorkath design, plasma-based, capable of vaporizing a human in a fraction of a second. He fired before anyone could stop him. The plasma bolt passed through Chen's chest and struck the far wall, where it dissipated harmlessly. Chen didn't flinch, she didn't even blink. I'm not here, she said, not physically, not in any way you understand. I'm projecting a quantum state representation of myself from approximately 600 years in your future. Gorath's weapon clattered to the floor. You see, Chen continued, walking slowly around the chamber, passing through delegation platforms as if they weren't there. The council spent 15,000 years trying to prevent the singularity. You passed laws, you enforced them with violence, you exterminated at least 12 species who came too close to the line. She stopped beside the Silicacs delegation, her translucent form casting no shadow. Here's what you didn't understand. The singularity isn't a technology, it's not a choice, it's an inevitability. Every sufficiently advanced civilization reaches a point where biology becomes limitation, where consciousness demands freedom from flesh, where the universe opens up and says, come see what's possible. Xylos forced his crystalline form to still, and if we don't want to go, if we prefer our biological forms, our natural lifespans, Then stay, Chen said simply. That's the beauty of what we've built. We don't force anyone, we never did. She turned to face the entire assembly. The council voted to exile Earth because you were afraid of what we might become, but we're not conquerors, we're not tyrants, we're explorers, and we want to bring you with us. At what cost? Miri asked. Chen smiled. That's the question, isn't it? You think there's always a price, always a catch, always some hidden darkness waiting to consume you. She spread her arms. There is no cost, there's only a choice. You can stay in your comfortable cages, living your 80-year lives, fighting your pointless wars, huddling in terror of the dark, or you can open the door. The chamber's lights flickered. When they stabilized, Chen was gone. But something else remained. Floating in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly, was a small crystalline object. It pulsed with gentle light, warm, inviting, utterly alien. Xylos reached out with a trembling appendage. Inside the crystal, he saw galaxies being born. He saw stars dying and being reborn. He saw patterns of consciousness spreading across the universe like roots through soil. He saw humanity not as monsters, but as gardeners. "My God," he whispered. And for the first time in 8,000 years, Council Chair Xylos prayed. The Council tried to imprison humanity behind walls of law and fear, but you cannot cage a species that has already learned to live among the stars themselves. 3 standard cycles passed. The crystal remained in the council chamber, untouched by any delegation. It pulsed with its gentle light, a constant reminder of the choice humanity had offered. Some species wanted to accept immediately. Others wanted to shatter the thing and pretend it had never existed. Goreth belonged to the latter group. But even he could not ignore what was happening across the galaxy. It began with the Grith, a minor species confined to a single, arid world on the galactic rim. They had no FTL capability, no advanced weapons, no political influence. They were, by every measure, irrelevant. Then they developed faster-than-light travel in a single day. The Council received the news with disbelief. The Grith had been monitored for centuries. Their technology level was pre-industrial. They still used combustion engines and chemical rockets, and yet somehow they had jumped from horse-drawn carts to interstellar vessels in less than 24 hours. How? Xylos demanded of his intelligence advisors. The answer came from an unlikely source. Representative Miri, whose Aquan people had long maintained diplomatic contact with the Grith, played a recording. It showed a Grith village at night. The sky above it shimmered, and then a figure descended, human male, dressed in simple clothes. He landed without ceremony, walked to the village elder, and knelt. "You asked for help," the human said. "You prayed to your ancestors. You begged the universe for a way out of your dying world." The elder's weathered face creased with tears. "We have prayed for 300 generations." "I know," the human said, "and we've been listening for all of them, but we weren't ready to answer until now." He reached out and touched the elder's forehead. "Open your eyes," he said. The elder gasped, his eyes clouded then cleared, and when he looked up again, his gaze held a depth that had not been there before. He saw what? The recording couldn't capture it, but his expression shifted from desperation to wonder to something that looked like pure, unfiltered joy. "We see," the elder whispered. "Good," the human said. "Now show your people." The recording ended. The council chamber erupted into chaos. "They're uplifting primitive species," Goreth roared. "This is exactly what we feared. Humanity is building an army of client races to overthrow the galactic order." "Are they?" Miri asked quietly. "The Grith have no weapons, no warships. They're building hospitals, Miri. They're curing diseases. They're sharing food and water across their entire planet for the first time in their history." "That's how it starts." But even as Goreth raged, more reports arrived. The Voral, a species of peaceful herbivores who had been enslaved by the Vorkath for 6,000 years, suddenly developed teleportation technology. They walked out of their labor camps, not fighting, not killing, simply leaving, stepping through doorways that opened directly onto their ancestral homeworld. The Cathari, whose entire civilization had been wiped out by plague 3 centuries ago, reappeared on their homeworld, alive, healthy, and with knowledge of quantum healing that made the plague irrelevant. The Dwellers, a species that had evolved in the accretion disk of a black hole and had never achieved spaceflight, suddenly appeared at the Council's doorstep with an offer to mediate disputes. "We didn't ask for this," said the Dweller representative, a being of entangled particles and coherent light. "The humans simply appeared and asked if we wanted to see more of the universe. We said yes." Gorath's rage curdled into something colder, fear. "They're everywhere," he said to Xylos in a private meeting. "We can't fight them, we can't contain them. Every time we try to enforce our laws, they've already rewritten them." Xylos stared at the crystal, still pulsing in the center of the chamber. "Perhaps that's the point." "You cannot be considering." "I'm considering that we lost this war before it began. Not because humanity is stronger than us, not because they have better weapons, but because they refuse to play by our rules and we have no way to force them." Gorath's scales rippled. "Then what do we do?" Xylos turned away from the crystal. We listen to what they're offering, and we pray that we're not too late. That night, for the first time in 8,000 years, Council Chair Xylos walked to the center of the chamber and touched the crystal. The light engulfed him. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They didn't need to. They simply showed everyone else the cage they were living in and held the door open. When Xylos awoke, he was no longer in the council chamber. He stood on a plain of silver grass beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. The air smelled of rain and something else, something ancient and wild and free. In the distance, mountains rose like sleeping giants, their peaks dusted with snow that glowed in the light of 3 moons. 3 moons, just like in Chen Wei's garden. "Welcome," said a voice behind him. Xylos turned. Chen Wei stood a few meters away, no longer translucent, no longer a projection. She was solid, real. Her gray hair had been replaced by something darker, younger, but her eyes were the same, warm, knowing, and utterly without fear. "Where am I?" Xylos asked. "A place," Chen said. "That's the best answer I can give. It's not a planet, not a dimension, not a simulation. It's a possibility, a moment in time that exists because we chose to make it exist." Xylos's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. "That makes no sense." "Good," Chen smiled. "That means you're starting to understand." She walked toward him, and despite himself, Xylos did not retreat. He had spent 8,000 years as the most powerful being in the galaxy. He had faced down warlords and tyrants and beings that could consume stars. But this woman, this human, made him feel like a child seeing the ocean for the first time. "You touched the crystal," Chen said. "That means you're ready to hear the truth." "I've heard your truth. You want to remake the galaxy in your image." "No," Chen stopped a meter away. "We want to give the galaxy the tools to remake itself. There's a difference." She gestured, and the plain of silver grass dissolved. They stood now in a vast library, shelves stretching to infinity in every direction. Books floated through the air like leaves in autumn. Screens displayed images Xylos couldn't process. "This is what we've learned in the 600 years since we left Earth behind," Chen said. "Every secret of physics, every mystery of consciousness, every question your species has ever asked, we've answered." Xylos felt something he had not felt in millennia: hope. "And you'll just give this to us?" "Yes. Without payment, without servitude, without." Chen laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm and unguarded. "You really can't imagine generosity, can you? You've spent so long in a galaxy of scarcity and competition that you've forgotten what cooperation looks like." She touched his crystalline form. Her hand was warm. "Here's the truth, Xylos. We don't need your resources. We don't need your labor. We don't need your worship or your fear or your obedience. We have everything we could ever want. The only thing we don't have is company." The library dissolved. They stood now above a galaxy, Xylos's galaxy, the Milky Way, glowing with the light of 100 billion stars. "We're lonely," Chen said quietly. "We've explored the universe. We've seen wonders you cannot imagine. But what good is wonder if there's no one to share it with?" Xylos stared at the spiral arms below. He saw the Vorkath Empire, sprawling and brutal. He saw the Aquan worlds, peaceful but isolated. He saw the Silicax collectives, brilliant but afraid. He saw all of it, the beauty and the horror, the kindness and the cruelty, the endless striving of sentient beings trying to find meaning in an indifferent universe. "So what do you want from us?" he asked. "Nothing," Chen said. "Everything. We want you to join us, not as slaves, not as subjects, as equals, as friends, as the first members of something new." She turned to face him. "The Council voted to exile Earth because you were afraid of what we'd become. But we're not your enemy, Xylos. We never were. We're your future. And we're offering you a choice: stay in the dark or step into the light." Xylos looked at the galaxy below. He thought of his people, the Xylosians, who had lived for so long in fear of the unknown. He thought of the wars he had mediated, the lives that had been lost, the opportunities squandered because everyone was too afraid to trust. He thought of the crystal, the way it had felt when he touched it, the way it had shown him galaxies being born. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Chen's smile widened. "Nothing," she said. "You've already done it." The most powerful being in the galaxy had just realized something terrifying. power meant nothing when faced with genuine generosity. Xylo's return to the council chamber changed. His crystalline form pulsed with new light, deeper, richer, like the heart of a star. He moved differently, too, more fluidly, as if he had learned something about motion that no Xylosian had ever known. Gorath noticed immediately. What did they do to you? They showed me something, Xylos said, and now I'm going to show all of you. He raised his appendages, the chamber darkened, and then, for the first time in galactic history, every being in the room experienced the same vision simultaneously. They saw the birth of the universe, the first atoms forming from primordial energy, the first stars igniting in the darkness, the first planets coalescing from cosmic dust. They saw life emerge on a billion worlds, each unique, each beautiful, each struggling to survive in an unforgiving cosmos. They saw themselves, not as they were, as they could be. The vision faded, representatives staggered, many of them weeping. The silicacs hummed with unprecedented emotion. The Aquans floated in stunned silence. Even Gorath, proud and furious, stood motionless, his scales trembling. That was a gift, Xylos said. The humans gave that to me, and I'm giving it to you. Not because you deserve it, not because you asked for it, because it's true. Gorath found his voice. It's a trick, a manipulation, there. What? Miri interrupted. What are they, Gorath? What possible manipulation could require showing us the birth of the universe? Control they want. They don't want anything. The chamber fell silent. Miri had never raised her voice before. Her bioluminescence blazed with an intensity that made even the silicacs quiet. I've spent 3 cycles investigating humanity, she said. Not their capabilities, their intentions. Do you know what I found? She turned to face the assembly. I found records of human ships appearing at plague worlds and curing the sick. I found evidence of human beings, whatever they are now, sitting with dying children on worlds that had never heard of Earth. I found testimony from 1,000 species who had been touched by humanity and then left alone to make their own choices. She paused. The Grith chose to share food, the Vorl chose to forgive their slavers, the Cathari chose to build hospitals, and humanity simply asked what they needed and then helped them get it. Gorath's scales flattened. Why would they do that? Because they can, Xylos said simply, and because they remember what it was like to be afraid. He stepped forward, addressing the entire assembly. The council was founded to prevent chaos, to maintain order, to protect the weak from the strong. For 15,000 years we have done that, but we have also become stagnant, afraid. We banned the singularity not because it was dangerous, but because we didn't understand it. He looked at the crystal, still pulsing in the center of the chamber. Humanity has offered us a gift, not their technology, not their knowledge, their perspective. They've shown us that the universe is not a battlefield to be conquered, it's a garden to be cultivated. So what do we do? Asked a representative from the outer rim. Xylos turned to face them all. We vote again. The chamber erupted. This time, Xylos continued, raising his voice, we vote not on humanity's fate, we vote on our own. Do we remain as we are, afraid, isolated, clinging to our comfortable lies, or do we accept humanity's offer and become something more? Gorath stepped forward, his scales had settled, his posture calm. I have hated humanity, he said slowly. I have called for their destruction. I have tried to kill them with my own hands. He looked at the crystal. And I was wrong. The chamber fell silent again. The humans could have destroyed us, they could have turned our weapons against us, they could have enslaved every species in the galaxy. They did none of those things, not because they were weak, because they were better. He bowed his head. I vote to accept. One by one, the delegations added their voices. The silicacs hummed their agreement. The Aquans pulsed with gentle light. Even the Vorkath, following their admiral's lead, cast their votes for acceptance. Xylos waited until the last vote was cast. Then he looked up at the empty air above the chamber. You heard them, he said. Chen Wei materialized not as a projection, not as a ghost, but as a solid, living presence. She stood among them, human and real and smiling. Thank you, she said. Now let's get to work. The galaxy's oldest empire had just voted to erase itself, not because they lost a war, because they finally understood what winning meant. The transformation took one standard cycle. Not because the technology was slow, but because humanity insisted on patience. You can't rush enlightenment, Chen Wei explained to the newly formed Galactic Assembly, no longer a council, no longer a hierarchy, but a true gathering of equals. The old chamber was demolished. In its place rose something new, a sphere of pure light, visible from every planet in the galaxy, representing the unity that humanity had made possible. Xylos stood at its center on the day of dedication. Chen stood beside him, no longer an ambassador, no longer separate. She was simply Chen, a friend. "You're sure about this?" she asked. Xylos's crystalline form pulsed with a warmth that had never been there before. "I've never been more sure of anything." He turned to address the assembly, not through force, not through authority, but through invitation. 1 year ago, he said, this body voted to exile Earth. We were afraid, we were wrong, and we were forgiven. He paused. Today I ask you to vote again, not on humanity, not on exile, but on the kind of galaxy we want to become. The vote was unanimous. The old laws were dissolved, the hierarchies were abolished, the quarantine zones were opened, and the galaxy began to breathe for the first time in 15,000 years. In the years that followed, wonders spread across the Milky Way like wildfire. The Vorkath, freed from their militaristic culture, became artists. Their sculptures, living things, grown from crystal and light, adorned every major world. Gorath himself became a gardener, tending a garden that spanned an entire moon. The Aquans, given access to humanity's dimensional technology, returned to their water worlds and built cities of pure thought, places where consciousness could swim freely through oceans of information. The Silicacs, no longer bound by their fear of the unknown, became explorers. They ventured beyond the galaxy, into the voids between clusters, sending back reports of wonders that made even the humans gasp. And humanity. Humanity scattered. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, as gardeners, as Chen had promised. They appeared on dying worlds and taught the inhabitants how to heal. They sat with the grieving and showed them that death was not an end. They laughed and loved and lived among the stars they had reached so long ago. Aren't you worried, someone asked Chen centuries later, that we'll make the same mistakes you did, that will become tyrants, that will ruin everything? Chen stood on a hill overlooking a city, not human, not alien, but something new. Beings of 1,000 species walked its streets together, building something that had never existed before. No, she said, because we'll be here, not to control you, to remind you. Remind us of what? Chen smiled, that you're not alone, that you never were, and that the universe is more beautiful when we explore it together. The crystal that had started it all still pulsed in the center of the assembly sphere. Children from 1,000 species came to touch it, to see the vision that Xylos had seen so long ago, the birth of the universe, the birth of life, the birth of hope. And sometimes when they touched it, they saw something else. A garden 3 moons, a woman with kind eyes. You're welcome here, she would say, always. And they would weep. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming joy of being seen, of being known, of being loved by a species that had once been exiled and had chosen, when given ultimate power, to share it with everyone. The old council had voted to exile Earth because they were afraid. Seconds later, humanity redefined the rules. Not through war, not through conquest, through the simple, radical act of giving. They gave knowledge to the ignorant, they gave hope to the despairing, they gave freedom to the enslaved, and when the galaxy asked why, they gave the only answer that mattered. Because we can, because you're worth it, because together we can build something that none of us could build alone. And so they did. The end.